The town's only bank is scuffed up a bit, but it is open. And they have a notice about disaster unemployment assistance. When President Biden was here, he mentioned that there were things that the government would help with that we didn't even know we needed. And of course, no one was thinking about people who suddenly didn't have a job because of the tornado. But if you seriously lost your job because of the tornado directly, you can get help, and here's information about that. So that's pretty great under the circumstances. You know, there are times when people really do need other people to help them for a little bit. Well, that was interesting. The manager of the bank told me that they have not had a big rush for loans, that people are still waiting for insurance settlements, and that a lot of people do plan to rebuild if they had adequate insurance. But it's just a question of time and process. So for a lot of people, it's going to be a while, and for some people it's probably not going to happen. A lot of people who were renters, I think a lot of those properties were likely underinsured and probably will not be rebuilt. One thing that's fortunate in Kentucky, though, is that real estate is inexpensive, especially in this part of the state. So there are places for people who don't have a lot of money to stay. That's why there isn't a big homeless problem here in the same manner that there is in West Coast cities, because there isn't this extreme of wealth and poverty. Rents are affordable, and so I think a lot of people who were renters here have probably gone on to rent in surrounding towns. The flip side of that, of course, is that there's not tons of jobs around here that pay well. So you can see there's still debris caught in the trees. Some of that, who knows when that's going to go away. There's still some damaged trees, but people are cleaning up. This was a lot worse before. This is Oak Heights. It is starting to be cleaned out. This was one of the nicer housing districts in town. You can see that houses that survived the tornado are likely to be rebuilt or renovated or repaired. New housing is starting to be built here because they apparently either had cash or got their settlement right away. And a temporary building has been moved here, so people are making do, trying to protect their things while they wait for the next step in the process. You'll see that things are a lot more cleaned up than they were a month ago. They took the cars first, of course, for scrap value and insurance. They then separated scrap metal from wood debris from hazardous waste. The scrap metal and any usable stuff was taken by scrap dealers, and I'm sure some salvage resellers, like I had talked about in my previous video, came in. They're also doing some clearing of fallen trees because there was a lot of that as well. Now we're getting into East Kiggin Street, one of the streets that was pretty decimated. You see some attempts already at shoring up and rebuilding and fixing up what can be fixed. People are working through the winter on this stuff to save what can be saved. And then here we are in the worst of the blast. The amazing thing is that nature also took a real beating in this. Places are just scalped completely flat, and so there aren't a lot of trees left. Anything that lived here ran away ahead of the tornado. It's going to be interesting to see what fills in all of this. It'll become a red maple thicket if left alone. Most of the vehicles are gone, taken for scrap. There's a few that are still sitting here. They've taken most of the debris away. This was something that had to be done in the first 30 days because FEMA will pay for it if you get it done in the first 30 days. The stuff that's left, they're either hoping to rebuild or it just didn't happen, and now we'll see what happens to it. Down here were the low-income housing blocks, and you can see they were really, really destroyed. People got their stuff out of it. It's amazing that, thankfully, only 13 deaths in this debacle. This house will likely be restored if the window can be sealed in time. Ah yes, the ubiquitous riding lawnmowers of Kentucky. Don't think they're going to need one here for a while. People are working tirelessly. These guys are out on a cold day. In the foreground, no housing, and yet a tree survived, and in the background, those houses, that block back there, are all pretty much okay, or at least fixable. People have covered up things as best they can, and people have been pretty respectful. There really hasn't been any more looting or scavenging. I think that when that happened during the event, it had to do with people who were drug addicts looking for medication and trying to get their last fix before they moved on. The scrappers haven't been for this pile of metal yet. Now we're looking down at Zeno's grandfather's house, and yes, there it is. It's got the truck pulled up in front, and the side there where the two new windows are, that used to be the opening to the living room, and the carport would have sat on this side there as well. So they've made some pretty good progress here already. He decided he was going to just take the insurance settlement, his came pretty fast, and have them downsize the house. Fortunately, he's lived here a long time. He knew some people who could do the work and were willing to put him out in front so that his place could be shored up. It should be ready by the time he comes back. His family took him to Florida for the winter for vacation and to get away from this, and when he comes back, he will have a smaller but very nicely renovated house. The neighbors are up there putting new tar paper on their house to get the roof back in order. This place also is going to have a new roof. This is the house where they hid during the tornado, thankfully, in the basement, because everything else beyond them completely gone. And they are still hauling debris away. This house, unfortunately, already had some real roof problems and had a metal roof over it. I'm not sure if that's going to be able to be saved. There they are up on the roof, getting that in order. That was Zeno's great-grandmother's house back in the day. The fellows who were living in that survived, and they were pretty new to town. I don't know whether they're going to rebuild and come back or move on. More debris clearing down this road here. You can see the sorting process where they have hazardous waste, non-hazardous waste, and metal. In a lot of cases, of course, things are just being plowed under. But there's a bunch of metal that I'm sure will be taken. Important to remember that it is just stuff, because sometimes it goes away. This is where we had to walk right after the tornado to find Zeno's family. We noticed that the porch was gone on this house, and sure enough, they've torn it out and covered it up. I'm sure they'll build something else there now. And then this house next door, really pretty unscathed. Aw, look at the concrete cow. That's very 1950s looking. We are right behind the auction house now, and he has a shiny new red metal roof that cost him about $50,000. But a certain amount of it was covered by insurance, and he said, you know what, the business is good. The auctions do seem like they're doing well, and it was worth getting open again. So, auctions are back in Dawson Springs. Ms. Becky's place was able to fix their front, which had blown over to the next building, and get open again, so there is one restaurant in town that's open. And the Mexican restaurant is finally open too, although their buildings did sustain some damage that has not been fixed yet. But I suppose if you don't mind walking under that big twisted piece of metal, that the food is still the same. Next door, the Foxy shop needs some work. There are 4 little FEMA trailers set up here, and I think they're for people who are working in town right now temporarily. In the larger town of Mayfield, they are putting in FEMA trailers, a half dozen, and giving them to the neediest families that they can. FEMA trailers don't hold up very well though, and so we're hopeful that we're not going to get a bunch of those here. It seems unlikely. A little bit of damage still to the building that had been renovated, the day building, but I'm sure that'll be fixable. Redemption City down here is still a major place for people to get help. Mobile restroom here. This is one of the places that we donated, and I really want to thank Willie Joe and Leah Clow, and I haven't picked up yet, but Tracy Lynn also has volunteered Those folks gave us stuff that we could sell for additional fundraisers. The Fifth Third Bank has just become the City Hall annex. The city really had outgrown its old City Hall, and especially when you're trying to manage a crisis like this, and you also have the fire department and the police department there. And Workman's service station still does not have its awning. But most of downtown is about in the same shape it was before the tornado. I have a check ready to go. We've already made 2 donations, but I think we're going to give a donation to this place because this has turned into essentially a store where people who are needy can get things for free to replace the things that they lost, and I just think that's a wonderful thing to support. So that is where we're going to send another $500 donation, and we're so grateful to the people who have helped contribute to all of that. There was a big outpouring at the time of the tornado, and that's really great, except it means they don't really need more clothing donations. They can use other stuff, though. We'll see what they've got.
You got everything you need? Yes, I think this will do me. All right.
They still have some tarps.
Me and my sister, when she
They've
had
got
this
cleaners.
out there, and I got
Take only what
comforters
you
and
need
blankets
because there are many
and
people in
sheets and all
need.
that
I think
stuff,
that's
so they
great.
got me stuff
I don't
like
really
that.
need anything,
Yeah.
but I just want to show the
Thank
kind
you
of
so
things that they're
much.
providing to
You're
people,
welcome. Alrighty, we'll see
because
you
these are the
later.
things that you might need
Bye.
day to day that you wouldn't necessarily think about saving if you were fleeing from a natural disaster.
Our donors from our church.
Putting that out there. Well, thank you. That's really great. I appreciate what you folks are doing. Books, of course, and then lots and lots of clothes. It's all divided up. This was the 1960s bank building. I showed this in a previous video. They were doing this about, 4 or 5 days after the tornado hit. They've got all sorts of stuff for babies. They've got a lot of stuff for young children because, of course, if you're a family with young kids and you're trying to negotiate this, what are you going to do? So it's a wonderful thing they're doing. They've got some food over there and paper and hygiene stuff. So all the kind of things that you need if you are really in a bad situation. Well, that's all being done by one small church, so I figured that was a good place for it to go. One of the town's 2 liquor stores did not fare as well as the other one. They're awaiting their new roof. The car wash is still a ruins, and the Dairy Queen has not reopened. This is one of the industrial buildings that was destroyed, but it's become a billboard for affirmations that the town, I guess, really could use right now. They seem to have palletized whatever they could out of that factory that was gone. And then the one behind it, I don't think they've done much of anything. We'll drive up there and see. Well, I guess they are making some progress on this. Again, it looks like they're dividing scrap metal out from other products, and it hadn't dawned on me that this would be a slower process because, of course, there's more likely to be hazardous waste issues. I don't really know what that factory was doing. It had a sign on it that just had a vague corporate name that didn't really describe its purpose. So it remains to be seen what will happen with all of this, whether these places will rebuild or if they'll just take the money and run. If they do rebuild, it'll likely be with a smaller footprint. A lot of the industrial buildings that were here were built for old industry that isn't around anymore and had been taken on because of low rent by other industries and warehousing that didn't need as much space perhaps, or the type of facility that they were renting. So I suspect that we will see a leaner and more streamlined version of these buildings come back, if they come back at all. A little bumpy in here. Oh, I see what they've done. They've actually divided all of the debris into these bins and are taking them away little by little. There's a pretty bleak but very clear view of the part of town that was the most affected by the tornado. The gray building on the left in the foreground is the new temporary clinic, because the clinic was also destroyed, but that's good because it means there's at least some form of medical care available. There's a lot of retirees in this town who need it. The American Legion Hall is gone, but the tank survived, so I guess a tank is a good place to be in a tornado. Much of this low-income housing is savable. which is a good thing because there already were people in need living in these places, and the fact that a lot of them are able to still live in them is definitely helpful in times like this. The churches that were affected are starting to get new roofs. I believe that is the Catholic Church. Bucolic, Dawson Springs, Kentucky. From here you can hardly tell that anything has changed. But then there's this part.